Midsommar and Hereditary are arguably two of the best horror films to come out in the last 2 years. Ari Aster has elegantly crafted two engaging stories that weave suspense and tragedy into a twisted narrative. Let's try and deconstruct the contrast between these two films. Midsommar is the most recent of these two and follows the story of Danny and a group of friends on a trip to Sweden. Hereditary, on the other hand, is about a troubled family that's lives begin to spiral after the death of Annie's mother. I'm going to break things down into a few categories, but let's begin with the setting. Midsommar takes place in what seems like a utopian commune in Sweden. It's a bright and airy outdoor environment with everyone wearing white clothes that gives a sense of harmony. The area is very open and deep in nature. The characters spend a majority of their time seeing the beauty in what seems like paradise. Hereditary spends the majority of the time inside the home of the Graham family. Time is spent at the children's school and other minor locations, but the focal point is the house. The confines of the home are dark and old. The home is mostly wooden, giving a classic horror setting with creaks and shadowy hallways. As the plot progresses in both films, the home and commune begin to feel progressively like a prison that none of the characters will be able to escape. Both films have a small cast of characters and share a single core character being sinister beyond the main character's knowledge. The main characters in Midsommar are Danny and her boyfriend Christian, as well as Christian's friends. The relationship between Danny and Christian is strained as the film progresses. Danny is predominantly trying to overcome the trauma from the death of her parents and sister. Hereditary follows the Graham family, but the dynamic between the mother Annie and the son Peter is the central focus. Peter and Annie spend a majority of the film reconciling the death of Charlie. In a rush to a hospital after Charlie suffered from an allergic reaction, Peter swerves to avoid a deer in the road, but while doing so, Charlie had her head out of the window, gasping for air, and hits a light pole, killing her. Tragedy is the underlying consistency here, as this puts the characters in situations that influence the plot going forward. Throughout the course of each film, these core relationships begin to erode, and along the way, one of them dies. The stories for both films unravel into a dark, inescapable hell on earth that the characters never would have imagined. In the case of Hereditary, that last part is literal. I'd argue the hidden aspect of these films are the cults. In each film, the characters are given the illusion of choice, but the cults are pulling the strings, orchestrating events for their benefit. Their somewhat omniscient presence over the characters doesn't allow for any escape.
Joe, please, I need to talk to you. Joe, I really need to ask you.
In Midsommar, we're introduced to the unsettlingly happy ancestral commune or community early in the film. The characters are taken into their isolated society and try to acclimate themselves to the culture.
I don't want to acclimate, I want to go.
They are having a midsummer celebration that only occurs once every 90 years. The 9-day ceremony consists of ancient rituals that include sinnicide and drug use. The final ceremony requires 9 sacrifices to be burned in a yellow temple. In Hereditary, the cult is essentially unknown by the main characters, and their presence is unearthed through clues placed throughout the film until their motives are revealed in the climax. The cult worships a demon and are in need of a male host that shares the same hereditary bloodline as Annie's deceased mother. They have an obsession with decapitation as a means to appease this demon, and the grandmother was the head of the cult before her death and made sure that Peter would become the next host. Both cults require sacrifice to complete their rituals, and the characters act as vessels to complete the ceremonies. As I alluded to earlier, choice is something the characters never really had. Pele, or how do you pronounce that?
Pelle. Pelle.
Okay. Well,
Pelle.
coordinated the fate of all of the participants he brought. Pele knew Christian, Josh, and Mark would be sacrificed, but hoped Danny could prove herself as one that could live among his people. He knew she felt isolated and her relationship with Christian wasn't fulfilling. He was sure the members of the commune would help fill the emptiness in her life after the tragic death of her family. Although their presence was shrouded in mystery, the cult in Hereditary had their hands directly involved in their lives from the beginning. In the opening funeral scene, the unknown people in the audience are actually the cult members. They were the ones that put the deer in the road, causing Peter to swerve, resulting in Charlie's decapitation. The introduction of Joan was only to get even closer to the family. She's the one that convinces Annie at a point to perform a seance that allows her to communicate with her deceased daughter.
Charlie? What's wrong?
Unlike Midsommar, Hereditary takes a dive into the supernatural. When the seance is performed using Charlie's sketchbook, things begin to move all around the house, and Charlie's spirit even enters Annie's body. There's also a blue pulsing light that seems to indicate a spirit multiple times throughout the film. It's very subtle, but always indicates something supernatural happening to the characters. Eventually, Annie tries to burn the sketchbook, but in a twist, her husband ignites in flames. The rules are unknown and the consequences are severe, from cursed textbooks to decapitated bodies mobilizing to participate in a demonic ceremony. Things are rather paranormal. I also wanted to look into the technical approach to both of these films. The cinematography is fantastic. The use of long shots in both films lets you ease into a moment. There are multiple steady tracking shots that are slow and methodical in what was shown. Oftentimes there are long shots you couldn't even tell were happening due to its flawless execution. One of my favorites in Hereditary was when Annie explained to her support group her troubled family history. The shot begins wide but slowly creeps closer to Annie as she continues to speak. The shot seems indicative of how at first her troubles related to everyone in the group, but as she continued to detail the depth and complexity of her troubled family, it draws in closer to her to demonstrate her solitude. The same goes for Midsommar. Plenty of slow-paced pans following characters in the open environment. A keen eye would see the various things going on in the background. The dichotomy of the settings influenced the score in each film. Hereditary's score at best has a light twinge of haunting sounds before returning to the deep, moody, low-pitch, unending chords. The score is pulsing, keeping you on edge with the bellowing reverbs contrasted with the high-pitched plucks that surge with intensity. Then there's Midsommar's score, which is much more upbeat for the start of some of the tracks, but slowly twists into a much more sinister sound. High-pitched strings drown the score with a sense of despair. It's a haunting presence with the mismatched notes that add to the unrest with the scene. This is a trend with most tracks, as most tend to start lighter in tone but begin to transition as the song progresses. Midsommar and Hereditary both end with our destined protagonist being crowned and staring just past the camera, the new king of a satanic cult and the May Queen. The cult wins in the end. Peter and Danny are the core of their films, their destinies predefined unbeknownst to them and completely out of their control. Danny went from damaged and alone to empowered with a new slate in life and family of sorts that cares about her. Peter goes from, well, he goes through the worst and never escapes. His purpose in the cult's eyes is fulfilled. He is the host for the demon and I imagine will no longer have any free will. A stark difference in comparison to Danny, the May Queen, that is freed from her past and now in full control of her destiny. The dichotomy and correlation between the two films are a fun thought experiment. I thought they were both great, and they have haunting images I'm sure I'll never unsee. Ari Aster, when asked if he was okay in an AMA, simply said, "Nope," and I believe it. It must take being in a bit of a dark place to create these films. He said in an interview that a breakup was an inspiration behind Midsommar. The haunting stories he created are fascinating and deserve multiple viewings. I'm excited about what other twisted story he has coming next because he's got a big fan here. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you had a chance to see the films prior to watching this video. What were your thoughts on the movie? I'd love to see them in the comments below. Be sure to leave a like or dislike and subscribe for more content like this. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.